The recycler fitting had been weeping coolant for 11 hours before anybody noticed, which told Burton everything he needed to know about Waystation Carver 9's maintenance culture. It was the kind of slow leak that didn't trip an alarm, just bled, quiet and committed, until the secondary line pressure dropped enough that the environmental board in Bay 7 threw a yellow flag, and someone finally had to go look. Burton was that someone. He'd been that someone for 6 years. He had the fitting cracked open, and a patch sleeve clamped on before the dock authority channel even finished its routing chime. He acknowledged the ping with one thumb, kept the wrench moving with the other hand, and listened to the job brief with the focused inattention of a man who has heard every variant of this particular sentence twice already this week. Diplomatic attaché, Vethsa, required escort through the human access maintenance corridors. Corridor access logged as sensitive transit under Station Order 14C, which meant it needed a human operator on record, and the human operators on record were currently all either off-shift, off-station, or, in the case of Hendricks, technically present but found in the supply room in a condition that Burton had chosen to file as a medical situation rather than a disciplinary one, because paperwork was its own kind of leak, and he didn't have time for it. Overtime rate, Burton said. Standard plus 40, the channel said. Fine. He finished the patch, logged it, and went to collect the attaché. The Vethsa were not tall. That was the first thing most humans got wrong, having apparently expected something cathedral scale based on the diplomatic signals and the formal species documentation. Sci-Fi stood at about Burton's shoulder. She was made of overlapping planes of translucent tissue that caught the corridor light and scattered it in the blue-green range, and she moved like a slow exhalation of smoke. Not slow in the sense of being sluggish, but slow in the way that very certain things move, as though the environment around her was adjusting to accommodate her rather than the other way around. She was carrying what appeared to be a set of documents, physical documents, rendered on something that wasn't quite paper and wasn't quite film, covered in a script that looked like water remembered after the glass was gone. You are the escort. Her voice came out at 2 frequencies simultaneously, the words in human standard and something harmonic underneath them, like a note held in a room long after the instrument had stopped. Burton said, "Let's go." He didn't mean it rudely. He meant it the way he meant everything on a shift, efficiently. The maintenance corridors on the human access side of Carver 9 were not designed for diplomacy. They were designed for people who needed to get to a thing that was broken and fix it, and they were sized accordingly, and lit accordingly, and smelled accordingly, recycled air with a mineral edge, the ambient vibration of life support cycling, the occasional pop of a thermal expansion joint in the hull. Sci-Fi followed without complaint. He noticed, because he always noticed these things, that she didn't flinch at the sounds. Most diplomatic traffic through Carver 9 flinched at the sounds. The station had its own vocabulary of clanks and hisses and pressure differential size, and newcomers spent the first hour convinced something was about to fail. Burton had stopped hearing it years ago. He heard it now only as a series of data points. That was the recycler on level 4 cycling, which meant the patch he'd done last Tuesday was holding. That was the ventilation damper on the 7G cross corridor, which needed replacing but had been on the parts order for 3 weeks. That was nothing, just the hull. Sci-Fi was listening to all of it. Her head, or the upper portion of her that corresponded to a head, was tilting in small increments as they walked. "You know these sounds," she said. "Yeah. You navigate by them." "Sort of." Burton ducked under a cable harness that had been zip-tied out of the main walkway because the proper conduit bracket had sheared off and nobody had gotten around to sourcing a replacement. "Watch your," he gestured. She flowed under it without breaking stride. "Yeah," he said again. "You learn the station. Learn what sounds right and what doesn't. And what is sounding wrong currently." Burton thought about it for 3 steps. Damper on 7G needs replacing. There's a pressure fluctuation in the secondary atmo loop on this level, which I think is a sensor glitch, but I'm going to check tonight. And the elevator on the diplomatic wing has been running about a half-second slow for 2 weeks, which isn't structural, but it's going to be an actuator soon. Sci-Fi's harmonic undertone did something that wasn't quite a word. He had no instrument for it. "What?" he said. "I am nodding," she said. "Please continue." The route through the maintenance corridors took 40 minutes, which was longer than going through the civilian access passages, but shorter than going through the administrative wing during a shift change. And Burton had long since mapped every option. He took the second fastest route because the fastest route passed through the Section 9 junction, which was currently occupied by a pressure test rig that Lena had set up 3 days ago, and not yet moved. And Burton wasn't going to step around it or move it himself because that was Lena's rig and Lena's problem, and the fastest way to cause a problem on a station was to touch someone else's setup without asking. This was a rule he'd developed over 6 years and had never once seen fail in either direction. The atmospheric regulator was at the midpoint of the route, in the junction between the human-side maintenance warren and the environmental buffer that separated it from the VETSA configuration wing. It had been installed 9 months ago, replaced a unit that had failed in a way that the manufacturer had subsequently acknowledged, in the careful language of liability management, was a known failure mode that had not been adequately communicated in the product documentation. The new unit was fine. The attachment interface was not fine. The attachment interface had been designed for a wall bracket spec that Carver 9 didn't use, and the parts order for the correct bracket had expired twice without being filled. And in the interim, Burton had adapted the fitting with a length of salvage tubing rated for a different pressure application entirely, and a clamp he'd pulled from a surplus bin and checked personally, with a calibrated gauge, at 3 separate pressure points, and then checked again a week later, and it was fine. It was fine. Sci-Fi stopped in front of it. She stood very still. The bioluminescent planes of her tissue shifted in a slow pulse that Burton had begun. By this point in the walk, to read as a kind of attention state, the equivalent of leaning forward. "This fitting," she said. "It's solid," Burton said. He kept walking. "Pressure's good, checked it 4 days ago." She did not follow immediately. He stopped and looked back. She was examining the salvage tubing with what he could only describe as respect. Not concern. He'd seen concern on alien faces, and it had a different quality. This was the specific expression of someone looking at a solution to a problem and recognizing it as a solution. "The rated specification for this coupling," she said, "is not the rated specification for this application." "No. And yet, checked it myself, holds the pressure held for 9 months." He paused, brackets on order. Sci-Fi's harmonic undertone rose a half step. "You built a working system from components that should not have worked together." "I built a system that works," Burton said. "Whether it should or not isn't really the question when the atmospheric buffer on a diplomatic wing is the alternative." She looked at him for a long moment. Both frequencies of her voice, the word layer and the harmonic layer, held very still. Then she said, "Would you like to bond with me, human?" Burton's brain did what brains do with sentences that do not parse correctly. It tried 3 different interpretations in the span of a second and a half, rejected 2 of them, and landed on what it hoped was the charitable reading, which was that this was some kind of professional courtesy he hadn't been briefed on. "I'm sorry," he said. "Bonding," she said. "A formal acknowledgement of operational alignment. In VETSA practice, it is initiated when one party observes in another a quality of reasoning that merits documentation." Burton looked at the salvage tubing. He looked at Sci-Fi. "And this is, you want to document your capacity," she said, "for functional improvisation under resource constraint." "Yes." The harmonic undertone had something warm in it. "It is considered a compliment." His earpiece crackled. Lena, from the control bay, monitoring the corridor environmental feeds because that was her current shift task, and also because she was constitutionally incapable of minding her own business. "Hey, Burton," Lena said. "Not now," he said. "Just wanted to make sure you heard the question." "I heard the question. Wanted to make sure you understood the question." "Working on it," Burton said, and clicked the channel down to a murmur. He looked at Sci-Fi. "What does bonding involve?" he said carefully, "in practical terms." She produced one of her documents, the water memory script ones, from the fold of whatever she was using to carry things, and held it out. A witnessed record, logged with both parties' station identifiers, a declaration of observed quality. She paused. The harmonic layer pulsed once, slow. "And a mutual obligation going forward to notify each other if we observe the other person doing something inadvisable." Burton stared at the document. He said, "that's basically a maintenance partnership agreement." "We call it a bond," Sci-Fi said. "The function is similar to what you are describing, yes." In his ear, Lena said, "I mean, it's a good rate if you think about it." "I'm not asking for your opinion," Burton said. "You're asking a lot of things very quietly and getting answers you didn't expect. I'm providing context." Burton took the document. He looked at it. The script meant nothing to him, which meant he was about to agree to something he couldn't read on behalf of himself, and technically, if Station Order 14C covered his actions while on escort duty, possibly on behalf of Carver 9. "The Xenodiplomacy desk," he said. "They should." "Is closed," Sci-Fi said. "Second shift ended 40 minutes ago." "Right." He held the document. It was lighter than it looked. "What happens if I don't sign?" "Nothing," she said, in a tone that made it clear something would happen, just not anything with a name. "The observation simply goes unrecorded." From somewhere deeper in the maintenance corridor, a pressure joint popped, the 7G damper, running slightly off its cycle. Burton heard it, filed it, kept his eyes on the document. Lena said, very quietly, "She watched you work for 40 minutes and decided you were worth documenting. I've worked with you for 2 years and I'm still on the fence." "Thank you, Lena. Just providing context." He looked at Sci-Fi. "If I sign this," he said, "and you observe me doing something inadvisable." "I will inform you," she said. "And if you do something inadvisable?" "You will inform me." The harmonic undertone held its warm register. "This is the function of the bond. We become each other's, what is the human term?" she considered. "Each other's second set of eyes." Burton thought about the atmospheric buffer. He thought about the bracket that had been on order for 9 months. He thought about the fact that the Vethsa Wing's environmental systems were adjacent to his maintenance jurisdiction, and he had been, for 9 months, essentially managing their buffer on jury-rigged goodwill and a surplus clamp. He thought, a formal notification pathway to someone who would tell him when something was inadvisable had actual operational value. "You got a station identifier I can log against," he said. Sci-Fi produced a second document. This one had a series of glyphs along the bottom edge that were, he was fairly certain, the Vethsa equivalent of a signature block. "Yeah," Burton said. He pulled out his work tablet. "All right, let me see what format your ID needs to be in." He logged it under Miscellaneous Operational Agreements, which was the catch-all category he used for things that didn't fit anywhere else, and which the station administrator reviewed approximately never. He filed his station identifier in the space Sci-Fi indicated. She made a mark on the document in something that wasn't ink but left a trace that would last, he suspected, longer than the document material itself. She folded it back into her carry space. The bioluminescent planes of her tissue pulsed once, a slow sweep from mid-register to something brighter that he was beginning to read as the Vethsa version of a breath let out. "The bond is recorded," she said. "I will contact you through station channels if I observe." Something inadvisable, Burton said. Yeah, same. In his ear, Lena said, Did you just finish your shift, Lena? You absolutely just signed a VETSA operational bond because she respected your plumbing. Escort complete, Burton said, to both of them and to no one. He turned back toward the maintenance corridor. I've got a damper to check on 7G. Behind him, S. Scival's harmonic undertone carried something through two registers simultaneously. The word layer said nothing. But the something underneath, it had the quality of a thing that had been confirmed. He heard it, filed it, kept walking.